I'm Katherine Geffcken, Academy Fellow in 54, 55, and Summer School Director 80, 81, 82, and 91.
I wonder if we could start just by you telling us what the classical summer school is.
The classical summer school actually was in the brains of the old classical school in Rome as early as 1897, and they formed a committee to think about it because they admired the summer schools that the German Institute ran for school teachers. And they thought this was exactly what they should do also, because the school teachers couldn't come over for the whole year. They needed to know the monuments. And there were also other people who, for family reasons, couldn't come over for a whole year to be a student at the school. So they formed a committee and they talked about it for years. And then, as you know, things became a little bit difficult around 1912 when the future director went down on the Titanic. Carter became director, and then there was World War I, and then there was recovery from World War I, and the situation in Italy wasn't safe enough to bring people over for a while after World War I because there were strikes and violence around. But they finally got going with the support of the director at that point, Stevens, in 1923. And the purpose was to enrich the teaching of classics in the United States, specifically the school teachers throughout the United States. By the time the Classical Society of the Academy published a general directory in 1941, there were something like 500 or 600 secondary teachers who had been through the summer school.
Could you tell us how you became involved in the classical summer school?
I was professor in charge at the Intercollegiate Center in 1977-78. And one day after I finished that year, I was living, the academy had let me stay in one of the apartments in the villa that's now part of the great Sala Aurelia. Helen North came over one day. Helen North was the senior classical trustee, came over to have a drink with me. And when I was very relaxed, she said to me, would I contemplate taking over the summer school? And I was still recovering from the year of the Centro. Helen North was a wonderful person about finding ways for other people to do things. And so having the Centro behind me, I thought, well, I've got the background for this.
So we're at 100 years later from 1923. What do you think keeps the program relevant over the century that we've seen? Why is the classical summer school still relevant?
Well, I think what remains relevant is the material that is looked at. I think it's the sites that are visited. I mean, you can't replace going to see the Forum exactly, visually, virtually you could walk through it, but actually being there is another matter. The sites themselves and the museums and the objects in the museums, just a sense of the lay of the land. I mean, being up in the towns and seeing how the hills work and how the hill towns surround Rome, and how the Latins could sort of look down on Rome from the hill towns and the Sabines and so forth. I just think that can't be replaced.
The last question goes back to the classical summer school itself. And can you just say why do you think that it's still important for classics, and what does it give to classics today, given that classics, has changed from 100 years ago?
It reinforces this idea, this reality, I believe, that the classics is a very, very broad field. Someone once said we were the first area study. And the summer school shows sometimes with some pain, I can say, to some of the teachers who have and graduate students who never learned who have never had experience with learning on their feet outside of a classroom, that it is important to know the place where things, as I go back to my idea of place, to know the place where things happen, the topography within which it happened, and also as much as possible, of the artifacts that have survived and what they mean. It helps to encourage this point that classics is an area of study. It's a field that covers not only the languages, but also ancient history, topography, archaeology, numismatics, ancient art. It is the broadest possible field. And so for a teacher or a graduate student who's just known sitting in a classroom with a book, and the text, that there are broader things to think about, this is really important. It really exists. It's not just in the book. It really, really exists.
Yeah.
There's a lot we could say. I think it's really important the summer school continue.